I think. It usually takes about a minute or so for it to actually catch up to all the different platforms. But anyway, if this is your first time joining, my name is Tyler Bay. Welcome to the Weekly Wrangle. This is all about art, constructive critique. It's all live, so it's also about hanging out with you guys. Feel free to add in comments or questions, and it's about staying up to date with all the latest happenings that are going on. So, speaking of happenings that are happening, let me share my screen with you real quick and tell you about Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Right now at CG Forge, you can get 20% off anything. So that's consultations, courses, anything that I sell. And you only have about 11 hours and 47 minutes until I pull the plug. So make sure that you get on those deals if you're thinking about doing that, because I really don't do sales very often. This is just about the only sale I do throughout the year. And 20% off is about as high as I go as well. So yeah, make sure to check that out if you're interested. In addition to that, I have a new Discord channel. So I figured it was about high time to be modern with all the cool kids. And so I went and I made a Discord this past week as well. There's already quite a few folks that have joined. We've got 68 online right now and another 116 that are offline. So it's off to a pretty great start. And if you want to join that Discord, I need to make a better button for this. But for now, go to the contact page and then scroll on down to the join the Discord section. I'll probably make a better button somewhere on my website at some point. But for now, if you want to join, that's a great spot to go. Okay, so with those announcements being out of the way, let's dive into some art reviews. The whole purpose of this is to figure out what's working well and what's not working well so that we can all improve as artists. I'm not trying to tear folks down. As a matter of fact, I haven't even looked at the vast majority of these different projects before recording. So I'm experiencing these artworks in real time, and yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. Okay, so here's the first one. This is done by Baruch Zevin. Let's see. Yeah, there you go. You can see him right there. This is Spitfire, testing Houdini 20 clouds render in Karma. The ground is an image. So let's go ahead and zoom into this still real quick and see what's happening. All right. So one of the first things I'll say is I like how this is composited. I like how you have this ground right here, and it seems to work pretty well for the most part in terms of just, blending in nicely. I do think one thing that could be improved potentially is the fact that this looks like it was taken on a cloudy day down here, and this looks like partially cloudy skies. So perhaps one thing right off the bat that could improve this a little bit is if you had splotches of light, or you picked a different ground area that had a partially cloudy vibe going on rather than a cloudy vibe. So like this is all pretty even. There's no shadows, but if you had shadows, it might make a bit more sense for what these clouds are doing here. So that would be one thing to kind of nitpick. One thing I do like is having this plane right here. I think it adds a bit of context. I mean, imagine this didn't have an airplane in it. It wouldn't have any kind of narrative. You wouldn't really care. There wouldn't really be much of anything going on. So one thing that you'll find sometimes people do with environments is they forget about story. They forget about narrative. And having something like an airplane, or let's say this is a nature scene, having even just like a little deer in the distance or a buffalo or something like that, it actually adds a lot to an environment because it's starting to think about story. The viewer's starting to engage with something in that environment, in that scene, which adds more depth to what's happening here. So So the next time you're making this beautiful vista, the next time you're making this beautiful, let's say, water or oil painting landscape thing, try thinking about adding something in to influence the narrative. In this case, it's the airplane, and it adds a lot just by being there. So that's one thing I really like about this. Another thing to mention here, if we're going back to nitpicking, is I'm noticing a little bit of banding here. See this little kind of square? And this could just be maybe some image artifacts, I'm not sure. But if we really zoom in here and we really try to pick on it, we can kind of see maybe some of these voxels showing up as low resolution. You can actually see some squares. So that would be one thing to pay attention to. The edges here are also a little bit harsh at times. And you know, the thing is, clouds actually do sometimes have this little darker shadow on the edge right here. But I think anytime I see like a dark halo around something, I'm thinking, oh, this was composited and it's not blending into whatever's behind it. So my suggestion is anytime, and especially when you're against a bright backdrop like this, it's really noticeable then. But anytime you're against a bright backdrop, make sure that you don't have this dark halo, because it almost creates like a rim light effect in the sense that it's highlighting the subject via contrast, right? You have darks and lights. That always creates contrast. It always creates interest. But in this case, it makes it feel a little bit more fake. So if you had a little bit more glow around these edges, or maybe you cut into this a bit more if this was composited, that could perhaps help this blend in a little bit better. And again, I think we still have some of this banding happening along the halo as well. So all of those things can make it blend in. That's going a little bit nitpicky, but you know, that's something to keep in mind. Anyway, I think this is pretty cool. So great job, Baruch. All right, this is from Owen. It looks like Houdini 20's new cloud tool. Maybe a bit more noise on the big cloud, a bit of transparency on the clouds closer to the camera would be nice. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I'll just say, in general, with the new cloud tools in Houdini 20, I think that they're good for mid-ground clouds and maybe background clouds. I don't think the quality holds up as much for like a hero close-up cloud. I think the highest quality clouds you're going to get are going to be generated via a pyro solver. I still am under that opinion. I do think the noises were quite impressive, and in all fairness, it is extremely difficult to make nice cloud shapes via noises, and especially make cloud shapes that can encompass all the various different kinds of clouds, right? I mean, that's pretty hard to do. But again, my philosophy is that the pyro solver is still going to give you the most high quality results. On the other hand, it's going to take the most time, and it's also going to be the hardest to set up. So depending on your situation, you might want to consider your options, even with the new pyro tools. All right, sweet. Well, let's move on to the next project. This is Final Descent, a concept I did for Doctor Who Series 12, Cyber Carrier. I sort of reworked my original concept, initial modeling done with Modo, and then over to Houdini. Oh, cool to see another Modo person. I actually started in Modo, fun fact. I was a big Modo fan for many years. Still am. I think Modo is just it's one of the great modeling tools that was super underrated. But anyway, it's over to Houdini. Scattering and detail passes rendered in Solaris. Karma Material X. Clouds are Photoshop at the moment. And this was done by Robin. Let's take a closer look here. All right, so there's a lot of cool stuff happening. First things first, anytime you have a big old spaceship like this, it is a serious modeling challenge. It's not easy to break up shapes in a way that's organic, in a way that sells this concept. It's not easy to do that. Also, it's not easy to establish this big of a scale. I think one of the hardest things about these epic spaceships is just getting the scale to feel right. And, you just have to be really careful about that. Now, if we zoom in here, well, we can't really zoom in as much. If we pretend like we can zoom in to this area right here, we can see that there's a few things that really add to this sense of scale. Tiny little lights like this help a lot. This little detail here, these like little, I don't know what you call them, these little fin greebles or what have you. They're okay, but it kind of actually makes it feel a little bit smaller, I think, just because of that those shapes are somewhat big. But it's just tiny little things like that where your eyes are going to see small details and big details, and it's going to see it in like a half second and make a judgment in your subconscious with how big something is. And so as we kind of analyze this a little bit, just recognize that your subconscious has already figured out a lot of this thing, and it did so in like a half second. It's kind of crazy to think about it, but your brain is really good at identifying objects, figuring out how big something is, figuring out what something is, and it all happens like that right away in your head. So anyway, that's the first thing that comes to mind when I think of big epic object is scale. In terms of the clouds and in terms of the environments, that plays a big part of the scale as well. I do like these clouds. Check out this background stuff over here. That's really epic and awesome. I love how this backplate looks right now. I think it's just super cool and epic. Especially this area. We have different layers of clouds. It looks like we're looking down at stuff or looking up at stuff. It's not easy to get that illusion in there either, by the way. And we have some God rays happening. I think it's really cool. So that's working quite well. I would say perhaps this area where it overlaps the ship is a little bit iffy. It's not bad, but it could potentially be improved. The thing about it is that it's when you try to overlay something in the foreground like this, it's kind of tempting to make sure you're not covering stuff up, right? Because you worked really hard on whatever it is. And honestly, you see this sometimes too in painting, because when you paint stuff, you start in the background and you work your way to the foreground typically. If we're talking about, wet on wet oil as an example, kind of what Bob Ross did back in the day, right? He would start in the background with the clouds and all this stuff, and he would layer his way forward until you're in the foreground. Well, one of the hardest things about that is when you reach the foreground and you're left with the decision of, do I just completely cover something up, or do I try to just halfway cover something up and, kind of blend it in a little bit? It's tempting to always blend it in and to not cover things up because you worked super hard on everything that's on the background in the midground. But there's always that moment in those Bob Ross moments, or in those Bob Ross videos, where he tells everyone to be brave and to draw a big old line just right on down the painting. Cover up everything you just did with a big old, black line that's going to become a tree or something. And that's hard to do. It's really hard to do that. But the reason why that happens is because in reality, when we take a photo of something, let's say it's a forest, or in this case, a spaceship, in reality, there's most likely going to be a cloud that covers or blocks your view of something, or a tree that blocks your view. And it just feels a little bit more natural, like something you would see in an environment when that happens. So this is a very subtle thing, and this is, an opinion of mine, I suppose. But if you took this cloud and you actually covered some of this up, Not to say that the spaceship doesn't look great, not to say you didn't work hard, but if you cover some of it up, I think that it would settle in the scene a little bit better. You would establish a foreground a little bit more strongly, and it would really set that spaceship in the scene just a tad bit better. I do like the clouds up top here. I think it's cool how it's kind of rolling off, but I'm just saying maybe towards the bottom here, have a strong definition of clouds covering up some of this, and it's really going to push it back there in the composition. So that would be one of my, constructive critiques, getting nitpicky about all this kind of stuff. Besides that, in terms of the spaceship itself, in terms of the modeling, in terms of the shapes, I think it's cool. I think it feels a little bit bulky for my taste, like a little bit, when you, when you use like the peak SOP and you're pushing along the normals and everything turns to like this all like puffy, model of some kind. It kind of feels like this a little bit, where everything just puffs out. And so you have these really rounded edges everywhere. And I think that's kind of cool because it catches the light here and there, but it's happening everywhere. And I would kind of think that, I don't know, maybe you'd want to cut out some of this. Like maybe instead of this being one giant cube shape right here, we can break up this big shape and cut out like a section in the upper left here. Give it a bit more of a silhouette that's less cubey, like round cubey. And you can do that by cutting away some of this section and cutting away some of this top left section, just as an example. And then that would make your large shapes a bit more complex, which I think would help in this case. I do think that the mid-level detail is really nice. I think that the small level detail is really nice. I think the scale is established quite well as well. The little lights, like we said, helps with that. These little decals really help with that. And yeah, I think that there's a lot of great elements going on here. It's a really strong project, and obviously it was for a really cool project as well. So anyway, that's just some of my thoughts here. And great job, Robin. It turned out to be really cool. All right. What do we have up next? We have Bio Whale Jump. This was done by Ranadeep Mandal. Let's check it out. Goes up. Boom. All right. Pretty cool. First impression, I think it's nice. Goes down. Okay. We have a big old ocean patch right here. This kind of lets us know how this was done. I like that foam too. Foam looks nice. Different passes. All right, great. So let's talk about this one. One of the things, this is a nitpick, okay? I do think that maybe the edits could be a little bit snappier. Like, we can have this happen a little faster, this little text here. Again, that's really nitpicky. But, okay, let's talk about the sim itself. So first things first, this is a great shot right here. I love the shapes of the ocean going back. I don't know if that's composited. I don't know if that's part of a large ocean spectrum, but whatever it is, it's working. It's nice. There's breakup in the shapes. We don't just have one, consistent ocean patch everywhere. There's a lot of variety in the shapes, which is nice. It blends in really nicely with these scans back here. And I think if I'm looking closely, it looks like these areas over here are also darkened, which is indicating that there's water that's splashed up there. So that's really cool. Maybe that's just a good, a happy accident. Or maybe that's intentional. I don't know. But it works well. It's really integrated nicely. Let's back up a little bit. And let's take a look at this again. Also, again, this could be an accident or not, but this also seems to somewhat interact with the geometry back here. So that's kind of cool, or at least it looks like it is. Anyway, let's look at the main thing here, shall we? Whale goes up, whale jumps, motion blur is nice. And then this all kind of settles down right here until we have this foam that's happening. Yeah, all in all, I think this was really, really well done. For me to pick on this, I'm going to have to get really nitpicky. Perhaps one of the first things, and it's really hard to tell with this resolution, maybe we can, there we go, let's bring this up. Yeah, that's better, 4K. Okay, now we can get nitpicky here. Let's play this a little bit. And I'm looking at the moment before the whale breaches, okay? I think that the shading here could be improved a little bit, perhaps by some murkier water or less blue in the transmission. I mean, notice how blue this splashing is right here. I think it's just a tad bit too blue for my taste. I think I would probably go a little less saturated on the splash colors. That would be one thing. Let's see, we're flinging up some water here. That looks nice. And then we have this. You know, the other thing that I'm seeing, if we look at like down here, we have these particles, it looks like, and they have, you know, kind of a motion blur arc or some kind of streak to them. But actually, this doesn't look like motion blur. This looks like it was perhaps done by creating polylines. And the reason why I say that is because usually when you have motion blur, there's some transparency on the front and the back end of that strand. So it's not a solid color. It's actually a little bit semi-transparent along the edges. And, you know, depending on how you set up your settings, but usually that's what you would have, something along those lines. And this looks like just pure polylines, and I think that's what's creating some of the, I guess, harshness that I feel with the splashing, right? Because if this was a bit more transparent, or if this wasn't so stark, like especially down in areas like that, I think it would blend in a little bit more seamlessly with the environment. So that could also be a little nitpick that I have. Yeah, like see all that stuff? I think in the real world, you would, yeah, it wouldn't be this this noticeable, like on a per droplet basis. It would blend in a little bit more transparency. So yeah, I think that would be one thing. And even after it's gone, you can kind of see these really scratchy looks on the foam. And I think that's a result of the technique that's being used here, where we draw out those polylines instead of actually calculating motion blur. So there's that. I mean, it does add some detail to this foam, but I don't think it's realistic detail. It's nice to have small shapes in there, but I think in this case it makes the whole thing feel scratchy. And then, yeah, in terms of the actual foam shape, though, let's focus on that for a second. I think the actual foam shape looks great. These little tendrils are great. We have big old chunks along here, which is nice. And let's just back up a little bit and take a look at the edge as it goes out. So, focusing on the edge of all that. Yeah, I think the edge is blending in nicely. It's not like we just have one little area where foam is. I do think actually maybe if you wanted to improve this a tad bit more, you could try creating some kind of thing that would blend this in so that we have a less radial edge to all that foam. Maybe something to experiment with, perhaps. But all in all, though, I don't think that's the weak part of this at all. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, all in all, it's done pretty well, I would say. And I would just say focus on the actual droplets and the splashes. That I think is the the biggest thing that needs some improvement. Also, if we take a look at the shading here, I do think it might be nice to have a little bit more fog and a little bit less of that blue transmission because it's affecting how things are happening up here, I think. That could be another area to experiment with as well. But anyway, great job. That was a awesome project there, Rana Deep. All right, we got some stuff here in the chat. What are your plans for the future of CG Forge, Tyler? New course is really nice. Do you have something in mind for the future? By Owen. Yeah, so I have lots of plans coming up here for CG Forge. Houdini for the new artist just came out, if you don't know. I upgraded that so that it really has a lot of improvements. I started from the ground up and redid everything so that now it's compatible with Houdini 20. Coming up next is Houdini for the new artist 2. Right now, I'm in kind of an awkward spot where part 1 is done, but part 2 is the old version. So I want to get that updated as soon as I can. And in addition to that, I'm going back and updating some of my old courses to be more karma friendly. I know a lot of you guys plan on using karma more and more, and so I want to make sure that CG Forge is going to be compatible with more karma going into the future. I still think that Redshift is a better render engine, to be honest with you guys. I've run into a lot of weird quirks, and I'm still not convinced that the speed's better, and I don't think the ease of use is there because you have to go through USD with Karma. That's still my personal opinion on it, but here nor there, it's good to know both anyway. And so I'll be doing some updates to color management and shading techniques, and for right now, those are the two main things. So learning how to shade using Material X, that's also on the docket. And then also, I have to pretty much redo the color management course because that's now completely different. So that's for right now in the immediate future what's happening. After that, the new courses that I plan on doing include procedural modeling, so that would be modeling 2, and then also expanding on the fluids course with oceans. So Fluids 1 was all about understanding the flip solver, getting this witch cauldron bubbling. Then we can move on to oceans. It's a whole nother set of tricks and things to know. And then after oceans, not too sure. Probably large environments or terrains, something like that. But you guys let me know. What kind of stuff do you want to learn in the future? I'm trying to round out my curriculum and make sure that I have a lot of topics covered. I'm not really covering rigging and Apex quite yet. I want to see that settle a little bit. Anytime there's a new thing coming out, if I teach it right away, then I'm kind of chasing my tail as new improvements are made. So I like to let things settle for a tad bit before I teach it. But yeah, in general, that's what I got going on. All right, what else do we have here in the chat? Okay, so yeah, good question there, Owen. Next one, Matthew, the render quality is actually quite good. A lot of your videos showcase Redshift as the best option. Yeah, so we just talked about that. Without considering comp, it's going to be real cool in terms of lights. Yep, it's good to have some challenges. Yeah, that's another thing too. Some of my courses are taking longer nowadays because I'm trying to make these exercises and challenges, which take forever, by the way. For every exercise I make, for every one exercise I make, there's about 2 or 3 that I decided to not go with. So I really try to, refine these things down. What render is going to be used in the course? Yeah, so I'll be doing Karma for Houdini for the new artist too. And during that time, I'm also going to switch over to Redshift. Eventually, it doesn't matter. You get to a certain point where you know how to shade in, let's say, Material X and Karma. And even if I do something in Redshift in a different course, you can figure it out if you're good enough at Karma. And so that's what I want to do in Houdini for the new artist too. I want to get people to a really good level with Karma so that when they watch my other courses, it's not too hard to just shade it in Karma if you don't want to use Redshift. So that's my goal, is to get you guys to that point. Let's see, USD is a pain. I enjoy the tight integration, convenience. Yeah. Yeah, so that's there's pros and cons. That's what I'll have to say with USD and Karma. Depends what matters to you the most. And for me, ease of use and speed matter the most. And that is yet to be seen between Karma and Redshift. If you guys want to see a render comparison video, like a test comparison, I'm thinking about adding that in the mix as well. So let me know if seeing a comparison between Redshift and Karma, let me know if that kind of video might interest you guys. It would take a lot of work to put that together, but I think it would be pretty interesting to see. Okay, let's move on to, where are we at here? Yeah, maybe like one or two more projects, if that sounds good to you guys. This one here is done by Jose L. Molfino. I keep doing flowers R&D when I have some spare time. So this is using KenFX, Redshift, and Houdini. Let's take a look. Nice. Yeah, this is a nice render. I like it. Now, one of the first things you'll know I'll say about this is we have a plain backdrop. I'm always a stickler for the plain colored backdrop. I guess that is really just a matter of artistic taste, but I usually like having something in the backdrop, even if you just take a wall, put it like a stone material on it, and then like vignette the heck out of it so that it blends to black on the edges. If you wanted to still have like this almost like blend into a black environment, you could just do something like that, and I think it would add a little bit to this, or it would place it in a scene, place it in context. But anyway, here nor there. Let's talk about the project. First of all, I want to say that it's looking awesome. I really like this. The animation is beautiful. The lighting is really nice. I'm guessing that a gobo was used. I'm guessing because I see this complex shadow action happening right here. Again, if you know me, I am all about gobos. That's what I said in Houdini for the New Artist 1, I think. Having gobos is going to add so much detail and awesomeness to your scene. So every project you do, make sure that you're using a gobo. Trust me, guys, it is worth every single second that it takes to set that up. I mean, it takes maybe 30 seconds to set up a gobo once you have a library. So it's a very good use of 30 seconds. I'll put it that way. And in this case, yeah, it just really makes it a lot better. So I also like the camera movement. We have a subtle zooming in. That's always really nice. And, you know, by having a subtle zoom in, it makes it a little bit more of a delicate feel to this whole thing. Stay with me here. Imagine you were zooming in on this thing and it was a faster zoom. What would that do to how this feels? It would do a lot, actually. Like if you zoomed in from way back here and you just went, zoom, right? It would make this feel more intense, a lot less gentle, that's for sure. It would make it feel more like an action shot and less like this beautiful little reveal. So that's a very interesting idea to think about for a moment, right? You can use camera movement to make your compositions feel different. And that's kind of interesting. Like in this case, very subtle, slow zoom makes this feel more delicate, like a flower. If you wanted to take that idea further, what if you did even less of that zoom and you added a very, very subtle camera shake? What would that do? I think it would make it also feel a little bit more delicate and a little more, maybe even a little more playful by having that little bounce there in the camera. But as you're going through your projects, think about what the camera's doing, because that camera can add a lot to the feel of a shot just by how it moves. And this is, I think, a good example of that. Yeah, so in terms of the actual simulation, or this may not be a simulation, but the animation, we'll say, I think it looks awesome. You know, the unfolding of the flower is nice. There's also some follow-up animation, so it gets done blooming, but it doesn't just stop, right? That would be a very tempting CGI thing to do. Look at this flower. It goes out, and it kind of breathes at the very end. It kind of goes out, and then it goes in. And that adds a lot of interesting organic movements. Right there, see that? It's really nice. I don't know if that's due to perhaps like a vellum simulation or if that's actually animated. I'm not sure. But whatever it is, it definitely makes this feel more organic. And even just the subtle movements of these leaves over here too makes it feel, you know, more soft and realistic. I would say in general too, to make things feel less CGI, you always want there to be at least a little bit of movement in something. Like imagine if these leaves were just perfectly still. They were just like, you know, it wouldn't be as interesting as having this subtle motion here. So anyway, I like this project. It really makes you think about motion and how motion really makes you feel something when you experience a composition. It's something that I think sometimes goes unappreciated in some of these projects, but in this case, I think it works really well. So great job there, Jose. All right. What computer config do you suggest for Karma or Redshift? Computer config. Yeah, so I mean, in Houdini for the New Artist, the first section in there, I talk about computer specs and basically puts if you have a high-end graphics card, like let's say an NVIDIA 1080 or better. I actually still have a 1080 card in my computer, believe it or not. I haven't really updated to the 30 series or the 40 series. I'm actually waiting for the 50 series for me to actually upgrade. But you really don't have to go and buy the most expensive thing in the world in order to get these projects done. And that's something that I know isn't as fun because we all like to have the latest and greatest tech, but just keep in mind that as long as you have a good solid state drive, a good GPU, if you're going to be doing, you know, rendering with Redshift, or even if you're using XPU, your GPU will help you out there, and a decent processor. That's enough to get you going. You will find limitations if you want to do oceans and big old fluid simulations. For that, I would say you have to actually go for higher spec, you know, RAM amounts and CPU specs. But outside of that particular scenario, or outside of, you know, really that, then having just the base specs I talked about should be just fine. So 32 gigs of RAM, a really nice solid state drive. Everyone always forgets about the solid state drive. That's actually, I think, the most important thing. Yeah, then you'll be off and running. All right, let's do one more here, you guys. Let's see. Which one are we going to do? I think, yeah, let's do this one. Adam Heslop. Work in progress of a procedural system for creating sea critters. Early days, but I like where it's going. I like where it's going too, Adam. This is really cool and a really fun idea. Most of the system is in Houdini. Texture simulation / generation is in Touch Designer. Interesting. I don't think I've heard of Touch Designer, but I might have to look into it after this. Nice. So yeah, I'm just looking at this sea slug dude and I like it. I think it's cool. So what else can we say about it? Well, I can tell you that I do like the lighting and the shading. You know, those two things go hand in hand, especially when we're talking about subsurface scattering. And this is all about subsurface scattering right here. So one thing to keep in mind here, you guys, is that whenever you have subsurface scattering, whenever you're shading for that, you need to also be lighting for it at the same time. Because notice how we have some bright lights coming down, and that really creates this backlight effect. right around here. If the light was not shining down from up above, we can kind of see where that highlight is. I'm guessing there's a spotlight coming down. If the light wasn't doing that, you wouldn't get this effect here. And that effect is essentially what makes something feel subsurfacey. And so the next time you're playing with a subsurface object, just make sure that you're also playing with lighting at the same time, because that's very important. Besides that, though, let's talk a little bit about the shading here and the lighting a bit more. One thing you'll also notice is that there's some really nice breakup in the highlights. One thing that'll always take your shading up to the next level, no matter what the object is having a complex specular lobe. When I say specular lobe, I mean this spot right here, this shiny spot. By adding in just a little bit of bump or a little bit of roughness breakup, or sometimes the combination of the two, you can really add a lot of detail to this highlight here. As a matter of fact, whenever I'm shading something, one of the things that my eye immediately goes to is the specular lobe and trying to figure out the shapes I want for that highlight. So as you're shading stuff, really be thinking about what kind of shapes you want in these shiny areas, and that's going to add a ton of detail. I mean, imagine you didn't have that detail and we just had a subsurface shader and that was it. This wouldn't be half of what it is right now. Just because you added in a bump or a normal map and, a little bit of breakup, that one little thing you did takes this project up to a whole nother level. Also, very nice gradient here in the backdrop. It's nice, it's subtle, it works, it's great. What can improve this though? Well, here's one thing. Anytime you have a creature, a creature or a character of some kind, everyone's eyes are looking for a face. Everyone's trying to connect with this creature. And if a creature doesn't have eyes, specifically eyes, then you can't really empathize with it very much. It feels more just like an object than it does a character or a creature. So one thing that would take this up to the next level is just something to indicate the eyes of this creature. That would take it up a big notch, just in terms of how people perceive and receive this kind of creature right here. It doesn't have to be much. It can literally just be you, making some folds or something. I mean, maybe something more than that, but just something so that your eye can attach itself to the other eye of the creature, and that would add a little bit to what's going on here. I also think it would be a fun idea to think about these tentacles right here and maybe add some kind of light to them, like make them glow, have some sort of incandescent quality or feature to it. That would be a lot of fun. Be a lot of fun too to have the subsurface scattering and then maybe some kind of pattern or runes that lights up this, subsurfacey skin. You'd actually see that light propagate through the subsurface scattering if you had something in there that was casting emission. So that could look really cool as well. Add a little bit of glow to it. It could really make this thing pop. So that's a few ideas on how to take it up a notch. I think it's really cool that this is a procedural system that you're trying to make. And I'm curious to see what other sea critters you come up with in the future. So, Adam, if you're watching this, keep me updated. I think this is a really cool project. All right, let's see here. Do you like Karma or Redshift? I think Redshift is increasingly popular, has some features suitable for better production quality. So yeah, Zodiac, as I was saying earlier, I think Redshift is my preference still. Just from a usability standpoint, it's easier to use. It's easier to, let's say, get motion blur. That's a big one. It's easy to do the easy things. Easier to set up a shader. It's easier to add in post effects if you want a little bit of glow, to quickly send out a render. There's just a lot of things that are easier with Redshift. And also I like it from the standpoint of teaching, because then I could spend more time with high level ideas with you guys and less time with the nitty gritty of getting USD behaving the way we want to. So, my recommendation is still there, but in the future, I will be doing some more karma to get you guys to a good level on that. And then that way we can, just not have to worry about the render engine so much as the high level ideas of what's going on. Okay. What do you think about Renderman? I know it's used in big studios. I'm not entirely sure how often. Yeah, it's been a while since I used Renderman. Quite a while, actually. I think it's been, maybe like 8-9 years, something like that. My impression back then, which was a while ago, so take this with a grain of salt. My impression of Renderman is that it's a very powerful render engine that requires a big team of people to make the most of it. It's not the most user-friendly render engine in terms of the terminology. It's not always, like, it has a lot of features, but sometimes that can create complications. So, that could be good and bad. It also doesn't have the same noise patterns that, let's say, like Redshift comes with, because Redshift comes with those Maxon noises, which are really awesome. And not many render engines come with that. So depending on the kind of work you do, those noises may or may not be a big deal. It has been a big deal for me because I like to have a noise-based workflow in my shading. But all in all, I think Redshift is not a bad route to go. But if you do go that route, it may not be as nice for an individual artist as, let's say, Redshift might be, because Redshift is really aimed towards like freelancers and individual artists a bit more. Again, that's my old opinion. It's old at this point because it's been like 7 or 8 years since I used it. So there could be lots of improvements. I don't know, but as of 7 or 8 years ago, that was my takeaway with Renderman. Let's see. Okay, last question here. Zodiac, I remember you told me you were going to upgrade the Redshift lighting course. When will that happen? Great question, Zodiac. I've been wondering the same thing myself. I've been holding off on it because I've been waiting to see what happens with Karma, right? Because I didn't want to make a lighting course that was just Redshift specific if I was going to put in Karma in the future. So now that I'm bringing in Karma more into the mix with CG Forge, I think that's one of those things that could also see a pretty good upgrade here in the near future. That lighting techniques course has been a little bit embarrassing, to be honest, just because it's been sitting there for a while. But it's been sitting there because I've been waiting to see how Karma unfolds a little bit more before actually finishing that course. But yeah, I'll take a look into that. It's one of those things that I really want to finish and, get to a good spot. So I'll keep you posted as far as that goes. All right, guys, one last thing before we finish this. In the future, if you want your work to have this constructive critique, for me to tear apart all of your hard work in front of everyone, then go to the project feedback section of the Discord. Post your project in there. Say, hey, I really want to, have my project have this constructive critique on the Weekly Wrangle. It's a lot easier, I think, for you guys to submit this. It doesn't have to be CG Forge related, by the way. It could just be anything that you're working on, anything you want this artistic critique on. And in the future, I want to take a look at this as a priority in having these feedback, these artistic reviews. So just keep that in mind in the future. It'd be great to see what you guys come up with. That about does it. Reminder, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, it's ending soon. So if you want to subscribe, do so now. Also, when you subscribe, you stay at that price as long as you stay subscribed. So if you plan on doing a lot of work this coming year, you can actually save quite a bit of money by buying now versus waiting later. If you have any questions on that as well, feel free to email me, tyler@cgforge.com, or you can go to the Discord now, and I'd be happy to help you out. Until next time, thank you for watching, good luck on your projects, and I hope you have a great day.